Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Ben Azadi is a former guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first episode on episode 290 of Boundless Body Radio. Ben Azadi began a personal health transformation in 2008 and shed over 80 pounds of pure fat. Ever since, he has been on a mission to help 1 billion people live a healthier lifestyle. For more than a decade, Keto Kamp founder Ben Azadi has shared his unique point of view and expertise to help others become the healthiest versions of themselves through understanding the ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, and other ancient healing strategies. Ben is the author of several best-selling books, including his upcoming book, Metabolic Freedom, a 30-day guide to restore your metabolism, heal hormones, and burn fat, which is set to release in May of 2025. Ben is known as the health detective because he investigates dysfunction and he educates, not medicates, to bring the body back to normal function. Ben is the founder of Keto Kamp, a global brand bringing awareness to ancient healing strategies such as the ketogenic diet and fasting. Ben is also the host of a top 15 podcast, Metabolic Freedom with Ben Azadi, and the owner of the fast-growing YouTube channel, branded Ben Azadi, with over 330,000 subscribers. You can find Ben on social media and on his website at www.benazadi.com. The one and only Ben Azadi, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
I'm excited to be back with you, Casey. I love what you're doing, man. Man, wow, 290. That was episode 290. What episode are you on right now? Where are you at?
We're kind of like you. We release a lot of episodes, so this should be set to be like episode 800 or something. Yeah,
Wow.
last time we tried it was almost 3 years ago, if you can believe it.
Wow. Congratulations on that amount of episodes. You're in rare air, my friend. Really rare air. That's a testament to your commitment. That is amazing.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, you're doing about the same number of episodes. And I think you understand, you get into the rhythm and like you get into a cadence. And yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of dedication. But if you just stick with it and just keep scheduling people, you just can come up with a huge library of amazing conversations and get to meet people all over the world. And it's such an honor to do. And I know you feel the same way. And on that note, since you do so many episodes, I'm wondering if you have a standout episode that you've done recently that's either released or not released. I know it's a bit like asking which one of your kids is your favorite, but do you have an episode that you look back fondly on from recent times?
I love the episodes that get deep into the subconscious mind and how your mind determines your behaviors and your habits and how healthy you are. And Dr. John Demartini is a guest that has been on a couple times, and he's such a brilliant guy. He's a savant. So when I interviewed him the first time a few years ago, it was just an amazing conversation. I had been following him for years, reading all his books, and he requested to come back a second time, which is super cool. So his episodes are amazing. Dr. John Demartini, if you're not listening to his work or watching him on YouTube or reading his books, outstanding and phenomenal guy. He's just incredible. He really understands the mind-body connection, and I love getting into that.
Wow, that's amazing. We will definitely link that in the notes for sure. And you do such a good job talking about that, especially as we mentioned in your latest book. You're really tying a lot of things together, and obviously you're such a great writer. I really have enjoyed the book, and so grateful for you that you sent it to me. And of course, before we get into that, I have to ask you, what is something you're grateful for today?
Oh, I love it. Oh, well, man, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to spread the message of health and wellness and help people feel inspired, helping the world understand that God built your body to be self-healing. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. Stripping the power away from big pharma, giving it to the people. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to help with that mission that is so important with so many people who are sick and hurting. I'm grateful that I'm healthy to deliver the message on health. I would not be able to do all these interviews and travel and do all the amazing things that I'm doing if I wasn't healthy myself. So definitely grateful for the health, the vitality, and the energy because I'm living on purpose with my purpose. And when you live on purpose with your purpose, you will have all the energy and all the vitality. A lot of people who are tired are not really tired, they're uninspired. They're doing things they hate to do. So I'm grateful that I get to do the things that I love to do.
Love that. Well said, my friend. And yeah, you talk about your energy, and your energy is clearly boundless as you're going all over the place. I see you pictures in airports and making presentations. And to write another book in the midst of all of that, you would have to have great energy. I was
Yeah.
commenting to Doug Reynolds about his latest book that he made a huge push for in the middle of organizing all kinds of different conferences around the world and all his work with the SMHP. And like, there's no way you could have done this if you didn't have amazing energy that came from utilizing a ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, some of the strategies that you talk about. There's no way you could have done this without that.
It's true. And that goes for anything in life. The bigger the goal, the bigger the mission, the more energy required. And it could be to write a book, speak on stage, or just to be there for your family and be your true personality. And the energy is required to do all of that.
Yeah. Well, again, your book is amazing. Metabolic Freedom. The cover is really well done. I love some of the diagrams you have in the book. Yeah,
Here it
it's just
is.
a striking, beautiful cover. I really love it. It really stands out.
Pops. Thank you,
Yeah,
bro. Yeah, they did a
it's
good
great.
job with it. Yeah.
It's amazing. So you've written other books in the past. What was the nexus of this book? And if you could explain not only that, but also what metabolic freedom means to you.
Yeah, this book was written for the masses. It was written for the world. I wrote Keto Flex and which is a keto book. I wrote an intermittent fasting book, a sleep book, a general health book. But I never really took the time to write a book that will take somebody who has really no understanding on any of these concepts that we go deep on to get it, apply it, and change their life. So I wrote it for them. However, for those who are already in this game, doing carnivore keto fasting. It's also written for you because there's different plans in the book depending on where you're at in the spectrum. But I was looking at some of the studies out there, and there were three key studies that really convinced me to write a book on metabolism. The first was a study that came out in 2016. So this is a Mayo Clinic study that I referenced in the book, and the study essentially they were set out the researchers to determine how many Americans live an active, healthy lifestyle, and they based it off of four criterias. So the first criteria, Casey, was they don't smoke cigarettes. The second criteria was that they exercise moderate to vigorous exercise for up to 150 minutes at least per week. The third criteria was classified as eating a healthy diet, which in this case was just a minimally processed diet. And the fourth criteria, which was if they're a female, they have a body fat percentage under 30%. And if they're a male, a body fat percentage under 20%. And they concluded with only 2.7% of Americans hitting that criteria of an active, healthy lifestyle. That's it,
My
2.7%,
goodness.
such a small percentage. And then in 2018, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, well, I'm sure you've had other guests reference this study, but it showed that around 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. And then in 2022, which is a more recent study, shows that it's closer to 93% of Americans being metabolically unhealthy. So we have a big issue here. Metabolic diseases are on the rise. They're linked to so many symptoms. They're the reason why people don't feel well. It's not just the overweight and obesity group, but it's the autoimmune disease, it's the cancer, the heart disease, the high blood pressure, the chronic fatigue, the back pain. These are all related to the metabolism. So it really inspired me to write a book on the metabolism. And you ask, what does it actually mean? What is metabolic freedom? It's living the way God built your body, having a metabolism that's designed to use whatever substrate is available for fuel. So that could be carbohydrates for some people, that could be protein and fat, that could be your own body fat. But when you're metabolically free, you're free from having to count calories. You're free from having to snack every 2 to 3 hours to sustain energy levels. You're free to be able to travel and not worry about where you're going to get your next meal because you're going to get it from your body fat. Like when I travel, I fast and I just burn my own body fat. That is somebody who's metabolically free. Unfortunately, 93% of Americans at the minimum, they're in a metabolic prison. So I wrote the book to guide them into the land of metabolic freedom, which essentially is metabolic flexibility. It's just a different spin on it.
Wow. Well, I don't know. That sounds a bit misinformed. 60 Minutes told me that obesity is genetic and there's nothing I can really do about it besides take medications to get bariatric surgery. So,
Yeah, isn't that ridiculous, right? Like if that is the case, right? If that's true, then how does this make sense? In 1930, the obesity rates in the US was 1 to 2%. Now Harvard is saying by 2030, in just a few years, it's going to be 50%. Our genetics do not change that fast. But yeah, a quick pill for every ill or get this bariatric surgery, that's not getting to the cause. That's masking the symptoms.
you're saying 60 Minutes is misinformed then?
Yeah, right. So what a
It's so
shocker.
bad. A shocker. I know. It's so bad. It's really bad. I'll look at my Formula One book I have behind me, and it's got pictures of the 60s and 70s, and you see all the entire a spectator section, and everybody is lean, and they've got their shirts off, and they all seem to be fine. So clearly, something is happening around us that is environmental. Before we
Yes.
get into the way you separate the book into identifying the problem and offering solutions, which I think is brilliant and very well done, I want to start even before the introduction and the table of contents and talk about the dedication. Can you tell me who this book is dedicated to and why?
Yeah, you've done a good job with your research and preparation. I love it. I knew you would, as you always do. Yeah, the book's dedicated to my dad, Cyrus Azadi, who unfortunately passed away from a metabolic disease, type 2 diabetes, back in 2014. And I saw him struggle with his type 2 diabetes. I saw him follow the conventional wisdom of taking medication and eating these certain foods they recommended for him. And he ended up suffering a massive stroke, which left him paralyzed for 9 months. And eventually he lost his life. And it was really difficult and challenging to go through that period of time back in 2014. It raised so many questions, and I was angry. I was confused. Why did he have to suffer so much when we did most of what his conventional doctors told us to do for him? And his doctors were never trying to get to the cause. They never discussed that diabetes is a lifestyle disease that can be reversed with lifestyle changes. It was a huge mismatch because their only solution was a medication. And you can't reverse a lifestyle condition with medication. It doesn't match. You reverse a lifestyle condition like type 2 diabetes with lifestyle changes. So it really lit a fire underneath me because I saw him suffer and I went through a lot of pain. And I wanted to make sure that I got the message out to as many people as possible so they don't have to suffer the way that my dad suffered and we suffered watching him go through that difficult time. And that's the amazing thing, though, about these lifestyle conditions. Like, they could be reversed. If you just remove the interference, the body will heal itself. That includes type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and in some cases, cancer, autoimmune. The body is miraculous. So I think, that lesson, I had to go through that pain of losing my dad and watching him suffer because it spawned a purpose. I went from a pain to a purpose. And I say in the book, I was given that mountain of losing my dad so I could show the world that the mountain can be moved. So that is why I do what I do. And I know it's why you do what you do, to help people understand that you could heal. Here's how you do it. And hopefully the book helps us accomplish that.
Yeah, it's good that those kind of challenges help fuel what we do later on. I went through the same thing with my mother passing away of cancer when she was 46. So it was already gone after suffering from the disease for over 7 years and all the just terrible treatment she had to go through. It's just so preventable and reversible based on everything that we've known for a very, very long time about things like cancer and chronic diseases as well. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you. I know it's a little bit painful, but I appreciate you going there with that.
of
Like I said
course.
in the book, you do divide things out. The first section, identifying the problem. The second section, offering some solutions. What ails us? What has happened in our environment that has changed, that has made all of these chronic diseases so much more prevalent around us?
Yeah, exactly. The book is split up with the problems first half, solution second half, and then, all right, how do you implement this with the 30-day plan? And then there's some recipes at the end of the book. Well, it starts with being a sugar burner. That's the first step towards metabolic disease. And there's nothing wrong with burning sugar as a fuel source unless you're only burning sugar as a fuel source. So those 93% of Americans that are metabolically unhealthy, they're sugar burners. They're in a keto deficiency. They forgot how to burn fat. When you're stuck burning sugar, it's a metabolic prison. You are snacking every 2 to 3 hours on carbohydrates just to get a short hit of glucose and gives you some short-term energy, and then that drops, and then you have to eat again, and then it drops. It's just a vicious cycle. And meanwhile, you're stripping nitric oxide from your body when you have your blood sugars go up. And nitric oxide is a very important molecule in the body. We know heart disease is the number one killer in the US. And when you lack nitric oxide, it leads to metabolic diseases like heart disease. So with nitric oxide, when you have high levels of blood sugar, when you're a sugar burner, it strips nitric oxide, which creates vasoconstriction, where your arteries narrow. They close up. And that's not good because then your heart has to pump harder to do the same job, which then leads to high blood pressure. It's not salt that causes high blood pressure, it's being a sugar burner. And all of a sudden, it increases your chances of heart disease because high blood pressure, especially when it's chronically elevated like that, will damage your blood vessels and then it could lead to heart disease. So we want to stop burning sugar. We want to transition, I should say, from burning sugar to burning fat because that is the first step. And the insulin piece is really important because in that chapter on being a sugar burner, I talk about insulin and insulin's role here. And insulin, of course, is a hormone in the body that's an energy sensor. It senses energy coming in, and then it'll clear that energy in the form of glucose into your cells. But when it's excess energy, those get cleared away in your body fat, and then it leads to weight gain. But some of the studies in the book that I reference show, Casey, that you could have full-blown insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, for on average 6 to 14 years with your blood sugar levels, including your A1C and fasting glucose, being perfectly normal because your pancreas is so busy shouting out, screaming out, producing insulin to clear that excess glucose until those receptor sites for insulin go deaf, and all of a sudden those blood sugars dramatically rise up. And once you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, like what happened to my dad, it opens up a whole new world of metabolic diseases that you don't want to be in. Cancer is an increase, heart disease is increased. And as a matter of fact, most people don't even die from type 2 diabetes. It's really rare. It's what type 2 diabetes leads to. It's the heart disease, the cancer, the stroke. Same thing happened to my dad. So it starts with insulin. Insulin is the first domino to fall that triggers a cascade of metabolic disease. So we want to shift from burning sugar as the only fuel source to burning fat and using ketones.
Yeah, that's very well explained. I never want to miss this point. The listener's probably getting sick of me reiterating it, but you said the number one killer in America is heart disease. Think back to 1961 when we made our first dietary recommendations. What problem were we trying to solve then? It was heart disease. And now we have a laundry list of other problems. The one thing that we were trying to fix, we didn't even fix that one thing, and now we've got 50 other things that we need to try to fix as well. Like that's
Yeah.
a terrible failure.
Yeah, it doesn't work. I mean, the focus is wrong. Just like the war on cancer, the focus is wrong. That's what what created that low fat craze, and it's the opposite of preventing heart disease. Actually, contributes to heart disease.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for making that point, and thank you for making the point about insulin. I'll often draw this out for my clients where you have like a diagonal line on a piece of paper that's going up left to right, and then it kind of like flattens out, and there'll be a line on the bottom that's more flat. And when the top line flattens out, this one will now start to rise in that same curve. And just saying, like, you may have normal blood glucose, your A1C might be normal, but that doesn't mean that your insulin is low as well. And that's what we really care about. You can jump on that way earlier than trying to chase everything later on down the road where you now have this terrible problem of too much glucose. And maybe you could tell the listener, when we're talking about too much glucose in the blood in particular, can you tell us like what margins we're kind of talking about here? Like, I think people think that, having a cup full of sugar in the blood or several cups of sugar in the blood is like, this is how we diagnose type 2 diabetes. Can you talk about like how tight those margins actually are?
Yeah, good point. And on that note of insulin, I make the case in the book. That's why it's so important for everybody to go get a blood test called a fasting insulin blood test. You want that in the single digits. Anything higher than that will show signs of insulin resistance or full-blown insulin resistance. So single digits fasting blood test, request it from your doctor. That's an immediate action I would recommend for your audience. The body has really tightly controlled mechanisms for glucose. Glucose in excess is a toxin to the body. That's why it produces so much insulin to clear it out of the bloodstream because it's so toxic when it's elevated. The body wants 1 teaspoon of sugar in the entire bloodstream to be considered an optimal state, which is 80 milligrams per deciliter. So if you have a continuous glucose monitor on or you're pricking your finger and it's 80 milligrams per deciliter, that is a healthy blood sugar level. That's 1 teaspoon of sugar in the entire bloodstream. Now, of course, when we eat food, there's going to be a glucose response, especially when you eat carbs and in some cases protein. But that's okay. Your body's well equipped for time to time to produce insulin to buffer that from going too high. You don't want to see that what's called postprandial glucose after eating blood sugar go over 120 milligrams per deciliter. And ideally, 2 hours after you ate that meal, it should be back down to baseline, which is essentially under 90 milligrams per deciliter. So tracking is really important. Looking at your blood glucose, even blood ketones, I talk about that in the book. But to your point, yeah, it's really tightly controlled. And people think, well, I don't really eat sugar. I don't drink soda. I don't have ice cream, but they're eating foods that turn into sugar in the body, even if they're considered healthy foods like oatmeal or cereal or whole grain breads. I don't know why I'm doing this for all the foods, but they all turn into sugar in your body. It might not happen right away, but eventually it will turn into sugar. So all carbohydrates turn into sugar. There's an insulin response. Protein, very minimal blood sugar and insulin response. It's more of a moderate response, and fat barely moves that blood glucose and insulin response. That's why ketosis and carnivore is so amazing, because you're eating more protein and fat, really great for controlling those blood sugar levels.
That's one of my favorite graphs that you included in your book, is the difference between the
Yeah.
carbohydrates, the protein, and the fat. I think seeing that visually is really, really helpful. So I'm glad you included that.
Yeah.
You write also about other processed foods and including, seed oils and all that stuff. I think we're well aware of how toxic those can be, but you also included an entire chapter about the toxicity in other sources during our lives. Can you talk a little bit about that and how much of a contributor that may be as well?
Yeah, it was so important that you're right. I wrote a whole chapter on it. It's how environmental toxins create metabolic disease. I believe it's chapter 4. What chapter is that? I'll tell you right now. Chapter 5. Environmental toxins make you sick and inflamed. Yeah, we live in a world that's the most toxic than ever before because 30, 40 years ago, we didn't really have this issue of an abundance of toxins in our food supply environment, but now we do. And these toxins are arguably even more inflammatory than processed foods, including sugar and seed oils. Although those are bad, these are probably even worse because a lot of them stay in your body for a lifetime. They're called forever chemicals. So there's two classifications of toxins that I referenced in the book. One classification is called obesogens. These are toxins that enter your body through either your food supply, drinking supply, air supply, even touching on your skin, like certain clean, what is it called? Not cleaning products, but moisturizers and skincare products is what I'm trying to say. They get into your bloodstream, and then it signals a pathway called PPAR gamma. PPAR gamma takes those toxins out of your bloodstream and shuttles them into your fat cells. That's why they're called obesogens. They're lipophilic, fat-loving chemicals, and they make you fat. They actually increase your adipocytes, your fat cells, and if there's not enough room there, it'll create new fat cells from these chemicals that are all over the place. And the reason why the body's doing this, the metabolism, is because it wants to survive. The number one priority for the human body, the innate intelligence, is survival. So the solution to the pollution is dilution. I'm going to send it to the body fat because there's a lot of room there. I'm going to be able to store these toxins there and not let these toxins circulate in the bloodstream and kill you right away. The issue is that they keep us inflamed, they make us fat, and they're everywhere. And I'll identify a few of them in a second. But the second classification are called diabetogens. And not a lot of people in our space, Casey, are talking about these. But diabetogens are specific toxins that actually trigger beta cell dysfunction in your pancreas, which triggers insulin resistance and then diabetes. Yes, toxins that are triggering diabetes. They're called diabetogens. And there's a study that I found that showed 33% of all type 2 diabetes cases are now from these diabetogens. They're chemically induced, 33%, meaning these
Wow.
individuals could be eating carnivore, doing fasting, doing everything perfect, but if they have a high toxicity load of these diabetogens, they will never reverse their type 2 diabetes until you remove them. So where are these toxins? Where are they coming from? I'm going to give your audience some low-hanging fruit here in terms of how to identify them. Plastics are an issue. We live in this plastic generation where they're finding plastic, microplastics in men's testicles and arteries, and we're essentially turning into plastic people. It's incredible. It's amazing. It's not good. So plastic water bottles, plastic Tupperware, plastic cutting boards. We want to swap the plastic water bottles with glass like I have here. We want to use wooden cutting boards instead of plastic cutting boards. We want to use glass Tupperware, simple thing to do. But also when you go to the grocery store or the gas station and they ask you if you want your receipt, when you say yes and grab that receipt, there are studies, and I referenced this in the book, that show there are 1,000 times greater BPA, which is a chemical, in cash register receipts than in canned food. And when you touch that receipt, it goes into your bloodstream, and that is not good. So we want to avoid these. We want to keep our detox pathways open. I talk about how to do that in the book. But yeah, it was so important that I included a whole chapter because we live in a very, very toxic world.
Wow. Well, yeah, I'm really glad you wrote that. And I had not heard of that before as well. I'm not even fully confident I can say the word diabetogens.
You did
And
it. You nailed it.
I'm also a little self-conscious about my Nalgene bottle with my Boundless Body sticker next to me. No, it's really important, man. And I realize that there are things that we can control and there's things that we can't control. And so just finding the things that we can take care of and take steps in the right direction. For some people, that might just be enough. You know what I mean? Like I can't
Yeah.
control the 10 houses around me that all have Wi-Fi's on. I can't turn off their Wi-Fi, but maybe I can turn mine off if I want. You know what I mean? I can keep my lights low and that sort of thing. So just focusing on, trying not to get overwhelmed by this stuff, but also taking steps in the right direction to kind of get the load down a little bit.
That's exactly right, right? You just continue to reduce that stress bucket, and your body could deal with a lot of these toxins and hits that we're taking. Doing eating a clean diet, doing fasting, getting quality sleep, doing a lot of things I talk about in the book are all going to support your detox pathways. Moving your body, which I know you're a big fan of. You train, a great way to support your detox pathways, your lymphatic system. So yeah, you control the things you can control. We have detox systems in place to eliminate a lot of these toxins. The issue is that so many people are not doing all the other things, and now their stress bucket is full, and now they incorporate or they get exposed to these toxins, and it makes a big difference. They notice a big difference with them.
Yeah, that's great. So glad you wrote about that. Let's shift over to some of the solutions that you've identified. And I want to set this up by saying I do a seminar series around my neighborhood in the summer where week by week we kind of go over different concepts like what are macronutrients, why the calories in, calories out theory doesn't necessarily work, different things that happen in history, our dietary guidelines, and who comes up with these things and all this stuff. And I always start by telling people, like, we're not dogmatic about a particular diet. I'm not recommending any particular diet for anybody. We're just going to go through these principles and you can decide how you eat. And inevitably, I'm not recommending a ketogenic diet for everybody, but you get kind of like backed into like, well, here's the reality of what is going on out there. And I'll get a question like, do I have to do keto? And it's like, well, you don't have to. We're not recommending a certain diet. But if you understand these principles, you're going to be somewhere in there in somewhat of a ketogenic state, at least some of the time. So is that similar to your experience when you get asked like, oh, does everybody need to do keto? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, you nailed it, right? People think about keto and they think keto diet, high fat, bacon, eggs, cheese, meat, and that is one way to do it. But I like to reframe, I like to change their paradigm. And I mentioned in the book, and I say this all the time, keto is not a diet, it's a metabolic process. And there are many ways to enter ketosis. To your point, Casey, like just somebody who's metabolically healthy and going from, let's say, 8 p.m., they're done eating and waiting until 8 a.m., they fast for 12 hours, they might be in ketosis, right? Without having to say, I'm doing keto, right? They're exercising, and these are different ways to get into ketosis. But the goal is, to use keto as a tool, especially if you are a pure sugar burner. 93% of Americans really need keto. They're in a keto deficiency, but we disguise it by teaching them to burn fat instead of sugar. And it's not this extreme transition. And I love the way you explained it and what you do for your community, because we don't want to be dogmatic, or we don't want to make people think, oh my gosh, that sounds so extreme. So no, I guide people, easy steps. Okay, let's start reducing your total carbs slowly. Let's replace them with healthy fats and protein. Let's eliminate snacking in between meals. Let's stay there for a few days. How do you feel? Oh, I feel great. I have more energy. Okay, now we make some more changes and we kind of go along. And eventually we get them into ketosis without them having to like think, I got to go and do keto. So it's kind of like a ninja way of helping them understand we want to burn fat instead of sugar. Keto is the way to do it, but the only way to get into ketosis is to lower insulin. All right, so you lower insulin by lowering your carbs. You lower insulin by having more muscle mass. You lower insulin by getting quality sleep. You lower insulin by getting quality steps each day, not being sedentary. So there's many ways to achieve that. It doesn't have to be a high-fat traditional keto diet, because keto, it's simply a metabolic process that we're all designed to use.
Yeah, again, very well explained. You are a fan of doing this on a gradual basis. And I waffle on this all the time. When you get a type A person who just really wants to rip the Band-Aid off, they want to get started today and they want to jump right in. Do you ever concede to that and say like, yeah, you can get this done really quickly? Or do you still recommend that somebody get into this very gradually and go through a bit of a process to kind of get to the end goal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I meet them where they're at. If they tell me, look, I'm type A person, I don't care if I suffer, I don't care if I have symptoms, like let me just go full all in. That's my personality. I'm going to do it and I'll persevere. I will meet them where they're at and I'll say, okay, well, here's the plan. Let's go all in. Tomorrow, your carbs are going to be under 50 grams per day. You're going to, skip your breakfast. You're going to, but most people don't have that personality and most people need to ease into it. But yeah, if they tell me that's my style, that works best for me, I'll listen to them. I'll meet them where they're at. And I get that. There are some people that want that. They don't care about suffering and having symptoms. They just like, give me the steps. I want to do it as fast as possible. And if that's what they believe is going to be successful for them, because that's the way they run their personality, I will create that plan for them. Yeah.
And I assume that you would point out potential pitfalls and like try to help them along by, yeah, you need a little bit more fat, probably a little bit more salt when you're doing that transition, and your digestion might not be as good if you're doing it more suddenly versus gradually. Like it's still safe. It's just you're probably going to suffer a little bit more short term.
Yeah, I'll explain to them like here's what might happen, right? Diarrhea, loose stools, maybe a headache. You feel like you have the flu. It's called the keto flu. So yeah, keep your bitters up for your bile production for the fats. Keep your electrolytes up. Ideally you don't want to do it dramatically. Ideally you want to shift into it because it could be too much of a stress for your body. And most people understand that. There are the outliers to your point who like want to just dive right in. So the 30-day plan at the end of the book, it's written for beginners. However, there's a variation of it for those who are at advanced. So if you're one of those type A people and you don't want to do the beginner plan, you want to start with the advanced plan, then that's up to you. Wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, there's two different ways to do the 30-day plan, beginners and advanced.
That's great. Yeah, it's great that you offer both of those. And the book is called Metabolic Freedom. And when I think of the word metabolic freedom, inevitably one tool kind of comes to mind that seems to be at the top of the list, which is intermittent fasting. Can you tell us about the power of intermittent fasting for people that want to achieve metabolic freedom?
Yeah, fasting is incredible. It's when you do it the right way, it's one of the best ways to reset your metabolism. I call it nature's reset button. There's a whole chapter on fasting in the book. It was interesting, Casey. Yesterday, I published a YouTube video and a podcast that it's my fastest growing YouTube video ever. And I have thousands of YouTube videos. It has like 250,000 YouTube views in about a day, 24 hours. And it was all about this. The title is Your Doctor Won't Tell You This: What Happens Inside of Your Body When You Don't Eat for 36 Hours. So I kind of go through this timeline of what happens not hour by hour, but like the first few hours of not eating food, and then 14 hours in, 16 hours in. And people love it. They're seeing how incredible fasting is as a metabolic tool to lower inflammation, lower insulin, burn fat. So there's a lot that happens when you fast. The first thing I want your audience to understand is that fasting is a stress to the body. Okay? Doesn't mean it's bad for you, just like exercise is a stress to the body, unless you do too much exercise or too much fasting. Think of fasting as a muscle. You want to build that muscle as you increase your fasting window so you get all the benefits and you feel amazing. The first step is to get fat adapted. That's the first 7 days in this 30-day plan. We want to first burn fat instead of sugar. If you go into this, let's say a 24-hour fast as a sugar burner, you're going to feel awful. You're not going to get all the benefits we want you to get. So first you do low carb or keto, some variation, follow this 30-day plan for 7 days. The first 7 days teaches you to burn fat. Now, once you do fasting, fasting is incredible for the brain. It's incredible for your hormones. It's amazing for these insulin resistant cases and diabetics that are out there. Your body is hardwired for the old school. It doesn't understand that I could go to my phone and I could go on Uber Eats here or DoorDash and order food in 45 minutes. It doesn't get that. When we're in a fasted state, we have all these amazing physiological processes that get turned on because we're hardwired for the old school. So one of those processes that get turned on during fasting is the cellular cleanup process called autophagy, which I know you know about, and I'm sure you've had guests talk about it. Autophagy is incredible for getting rid of cells that are not good at burning fat, getting rid of cells that are inflamed, mitochondria that are not functioning well, these little battery packs within your cells, and it starts to fix them up, kind of like Pac-Man going within your cells, cleaning out the junk. The analogy that I give in the book on autophagy is a refrigerator, right? We open up this refrigerator and we have all these groceries inside of the fridge that all have an expiration date. What would happen if we let all those groceries expire and instead of throwing them away in the trash, we just shove them towards the back of the fridge, buy new groceries and close that door? It's going to be a toxic environment. Disease will manifest in that environment. The human body is like this refrigerator. We have cells that all have an expiration date. Autophagy is the process of getting rid of the junk. And fasting is a powerful way to enhance autophagy. Exercise, strength training also enhances autophagy. So around the 16, 17-hour mark of a fast, you get this increase in autophagy where there's cellular cleanup. Now, even before that, Casey, around the 14-hour mark, you're completing digestion, which requires a lot of energy. So then you have more energy once you complete digestion. You lower insulin, which, as we mentioned, is the key here. And then as you progress to more longer fast, I have different variations of fast in the book, like a 24-hour fast. You get more fat loss, but also what it does for your gut microbiome is amazing. It stresses your gut microbiome in a positive way to create more diversity. It helps with leaky gut, intestinal permeability. And then as you continue on with different variations of fast, there's something called BDNF that gets produced in the brain, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's like, yeah, miracle grow for the brain. That gets enhanced because your innate intelligence is giving you all these resources and energy, not because it wants you to crush a podcast or go crush a workout or crush your day at work. It's because it thinks you need to survive. It thinks you're going through a famine. Again, it doesn't know about Uber Eats or your refrigerator. All it knows is about famine. So it thinks you're going through a famine. So it gives you all these energy and resources, the BDNF, which helps with creativity. Yeah, there's just so many benefits to fasting. It should be a tool that I think everybody uses the right way, responsibly in their metabolic toolbox.
Yeah, well said. I love the analogy, by the way. And dude, I don't know if you know this, but I grew up Mormon. And so once a month we would have to fast, very much a sugar burner. And it was the worst 24
Oh my
hours
gosh.
ever. Terrible every month. And you just like spend the entire month like not looking forward to the next time you had to do it. It was the worst, the worst. Okay.
Wow.
I've got a client who is just starting to get into this, is just starting to do some time restricted eating. And she's moving her windows out a little bit. She wants to do her first 24-hour fast. And she said, like, oh, I can do it this Saturday. I don't have anything going on. It's really relaxing. I'll just do it then. And I said, well, do you actually have like a busy day next week? She's like, Monday is insane. And I said, Monday might be the better day. Like if you've got a lot to do, you've got presentations to make, that might be the better day to fast because you'll stay in that ketogenic mode. You'll have all the energy used to write the book. You mentioned that fasting can be a little stressful. Do I need to be concerned if she has a busy or stressful day that fasting might add to that stress load on that day?
It's really good question. And you're thinking like a great coach there. Personally, I do what the advice you gave. Like on a busy day, I'm fasted. And sometimes it's accidentally. Like I'll have a busy day and I'll accidentally fast for 24 hours, unintentionally, but I'll feel great. I feel amazing when I fast. So it really depends on how healthy, how metabolically flexible is she. If she's pretty good and she's already been doing ketosis and she's already like crushed a 16-hour fat and she feels fine, then yeah, I would go for it on a busy day because she would have the energy, the focus. But if she's kind of new to this and she hasn't really completed a 16-hour fast and she's just been doing keto for like a week, maybe she would do it on a day where she's not too busy, or even work up to it and not do the 24-hour fast yet.
Yeah, got it. Speaking of metabolic freedom, she just did her first skiing day where she wasn't totally tied to food and got to get some
Wow.
extra runs in and just had the best time. She's got a vacation coming up where other people in her extended family won't be doing the same diet. And it'll be interesting to see her observe like how tied to food vacations are when you have to plan breakfast, get a snack, plan
Yeah.
lunch, get a snack, grab a coffee, like all this stuff where she can just go out and have a great time wherever she is. So it's
That's
awesome.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
congrats to her. You're doing great work with her. That's amazing.
It's pretty cool. She gets all the credit for sure. There's a lot of amazing things you talk about in solutions. And of course, we're going to talk about chapter 10. I love that you included this. I consider you one of the all-time experts on talking about this and integrating this into a healthy lifestyle. And I would argue that there really should be no separation between, we consider physical health, mental health, and also emotional and spiritual health. So can you tell us about chapter 10 and why you made absolutely sure to get this in the book?
Yeah. Chapter 10 is the best chapter in the book by far. It's my favorite chapter. So if you buy the book and you're one of those people that like just buy the book to have the book and not really read the book, at least read chapter 10. Okay. It has the ability to change your life forever, not just your health, but everything. I might write a whole book based on chapter 10 in the future. I might call it
You should.
I might call it mental freedom is the name that I was thinking about because it's just, oh my gosh, it's so good. Chapter 10 is all about how your thoughts influence your metabolism, influence health or disease. So it gets into the placebo effect, it gets into the nocebo effect, it gets into the most anti-inflammatory supplement in the world, vitamin G. It gets into why it's important to have goals in life and how goals actually help extend your lifespan and the science of longevity as it pertains to having purpose. So a couple of things from the book that I'll share. I start out the book, the chapter, excuse me, chapter 10, sharing a story that I got from Bob Proctor. This is a story that was in the newspapers from the 1960s, and it illustrates how powerful your mind is. So I'm going to share the story with your audience right now, give them a sneak peek. It's about a railroad employee who worked on a train station inside of a refrigerator cart. And one night he was working late, way past the time he was supposed to clock out. He didn't realize that it was that late. So he started to exit the refrigerator cart, but the door was locked. So this guy's banging on the door. Nobody's around. Everybody had clocked out about an hour before, and they had gone home for the day or for the night. So he was stuck. And he knew that nobody was going to be around for another 7 or 8 hours. And it was cold. He was inside of the refrigerator cart. So he's stuck there. He's trying to break the lock. He couldn't break it. So he starts writing on the wall, kind of documenting his journey throughout the night. So around midnight, he writes the words on the wall: freezing. I'm locked in here. Nobody's around. I don't know what to do. 1 a.m., he writes the words: still cold. I continue to shiver. I'm stuck. 2 a.m., he wrote: I keep looking at the temperature apparatus. It keeps dropping. I can't keep myself warm. I'm going to freeze to death. 3 a.m., I'm freezing to death. I can't keep myself warm. God help me. 8 a.m. rolls around. His coworkers clock in. They open up that refrigerator cart, and the man's dead. Hypothermia. He froze to death. What was interesting about the story, though, is that the temperature apparatus that this man was looking at had been malfunctioning for days, and it never got below 55 degrees Fahrenheit. His thoughts created death, Casey. And if our thoughts could do that, do you think our thoughts could actually heal the body as well? The answer is yes, it can. So before I continue, I want to hear your thoughts on that story.
It's just so wild. It's just like full body chills to hear that. And yeah, I could absolutely see it happening. If you are thinking that is happening to you and it is out of your control, yeah, I can see it happening. It's a wild story though.
Absolutely wild, man. Absolutely. But that's called the nocebo effect, where your mind works against you. Then we also have the placebo effect. Everybody has heard of the placebo effect. There's a lot of power to the placebo effect. But in chapter 10, I talk about the origin of the placebo effect, which was in World War II. German bombardment on the U.S. military. There was an anesthesiologist, Dr. Henry Beecher, working in a medical tent for the U.S. military. And all these soldiers were coming into that tent with extreme wounds, bullet wounds, legs blown off, fingers and arms. It was a gruesome scene. So what this Dr. Beecher was doing for the soldiers is he was administering morphine to stabilize the patient so they could transfer them to the hospital, perform surgery, and save their life, which that's how it works. But what ended up happening is they ran out of morphine. And the nurse on staff noticed that the morphine was tapped out. She was panicking. She didn't know what to do. So she grabbed saline solution, salt water, put that inside of the needles, gave it to Dr. Beecher. He had the belief he had morphine. So he would tell the soldier, I'm giving you morphine. In a matter of seconds, you're going to stabilize. We're going to save your life. And he would inject them with salt water. And most of them survived with salt water, thinking they were getting morphine, right? Incredible. So the war ended, and then Harvard studied what happened in this medical tent, and that's where the placebo effect started. That's where it originated in terms of the studying of it, because it's always been around. So that's incredible. It just shows you how powerful your thoughts are. And we have 60,000 thoughts every single day. And Dr. Bruce Lipton has proven, he's a world-renowned cell biologist, he has proven that your thoughts are a frequency that have the ability to communicate with your DNA nucleus. Meaning, if it's a angry thought, a bitter thought, a hateful thought, a resentful thought, the signal sent to your DNA nucleus produces inflammatory proteins, which shortens your telomeres, which damages your DNA and shortens your lifespan with a single thought. But if that thought is loving, grateful, abundant, happy, same signal sent to the DNA, but now it's an anti-inflammatory protein, protecting your telomeres, protecting your DNA, extending your lifespan. So if we have 60,000 thoughts a day, which we do, we have 60,000 opportunities every day to put the body in a healing, anti-inflammatory state. That is the greatest health biohack you will ever learn. So when you start to really focus on this and be intentional and become aware of those thoughts, you have the ability to transform your health, your relationships and everything. And I go much deeper in the book, but it's the best chapter. It's just something that I think a lot of people miss in the health space.
It's really good. And in the book, which people should get to figure this out, but like you're very tactical and practical about it, like actually writing things down, having cards that you look at and see and repeating things. And, it can sound a little bit woo woo, but at the end of the day, like you're right, like those things add up and start to contribute into your own belief that you can be great, you can accomplish something, you can lose the weight, you can be metabolically healthy. So I just think it's so important. I'm really glad you included all of that in there.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. Some people could read that part because I talk about the concept of self-image and how you view yourself. You cannot outperform the way you view yourself, which is your self-image, and how you change that is you write an affirmation of the new version of yourself. And some people might read that and say, "Oh, why are you putting this in like a book that has 274 citations? This sounds woo-woo." It's not. Any psychiatrist or psychologist that read the book and read that part of the book, they understand that's exactly how the mind works. The subconscious mind is totally deductive, meaning it accepts everything. So if you imprint a new idea by writing it down, and I do this with all my goals, I'm showing you my goal. I have several goal cards that I read all day, and I give you an actual affirmation in the book. When you continuously imprint that into your subconscious mind, you remove the old conditioning and you replace it with a new idea, which changes your behavior, changes your health. It prevents you from sabotaging yourself. So I encourage people to do it. It's part of the 30-day plan. You do it for 30 days and you will replace that old image, which is usually a bad image of yourself, with a new reborn image where you are just unstoppable.
I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. I'm going to ask this question on behalf of several of my clients. And when I get the question myself, I feel about as helpless as ever when I'm trying to answer this question. Is like these people that we work with, they're very highly motivated. They understand the problem. They're bought in. They want to do this. And they are in relationships where both parents work. They have kids who, several young kids. They all have school and issues themselves. There's so much stress out there, and people always ask me, like, what do I do when I'm really stressed out? And I say to them, like, I can give you answers, but those answers, you're not going to like to hear those answers when you're right in the middle of stress. Like, you don't want to hear me say, like, oh, you should go for a little walk. Like, you can't even handle your 1.5-year-old right now. Like, you're not going to go on a walk. You should, sit down and breathe and count your breaths and all this stuff. And it's like, that's the last thing they're going to want to do. And then they end up doing something that sabotages themselves and sets them back, and they get upset at themselves. And it's a cycle of like trying to remotivate. And what do you tell to somebody when they're asking you that type of question? Like, I really want to do this, but like something will set off my entire day, and then I'll have a snack and that sets off the, blood sugar up and down. How do you help people understand that even in stressful situations, they can still get on top of things?
I would say that, stress is not the problem here. It's your reaction to the stress. You're reacting to the stress instead of responding to the stress. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, who was in a Jewish concentration camp, said in his book, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies your power. Right? So you're going to get stimulus through stress, whether it's family, TV, social media. And if you're constantly reacting, you just lose your power because you're not using that space to respond. It's not the stress. It's not the circumstances that the person's blaming it on. It's their inability to respond to it. They're reacting to it. And the sabotage piece is different, a little bit different than the piece here on the stress. And people don't like to hear this answer because it forces them to take responsibility. The truth is this: nobody can make you feel any certain way. You are giving them permission to offend you. You're giving them permission to stress you out. It's you who have the power. Bob Proctor used to say, "You are the only problem you'll ever have, and you're the only solution." Right. So that's great news, because the person you need to have a consultation with is always around. It's you. And I remember Bob Proctor, and I'm not mitigating your problems. I'm not trying to be. I'm empathetic to the problems, and I understand people are going through a lot of crazy stuff. But it really relies on your faith. Like, don't take your big problems to God. Take your big God to your problems. Right. The stronger your faith, whether it's God, the universe, the stronger your faith, the more you're going to be able to overcome these opportunities. They're not even challenges; they're opportunities to get better and stronger. Now, this is different though than why do I keep sabotaging myself? Why you keep sabotaging yourself is because of your self-image. And the book talks about this. I'm not going to go deep into it now, but you have a self-image of yourself. I'll give you the example I gave in the book. In the book, I talk about somebody who's overweight, who has a self-image of an overweight person, like I did. When I was obese, my self-image was an overweight Ben. You make the conscious decision to hire a coach, maybe a personal trainer, a health coach like Casey, or join a program. You make a conscious decision to change and lose weight. And you start to make some progress. Maybe you lose 5 pounds the first month, but you never worked on the self-image. It's still an obese person or an overweight person that you identify with. You will find a way very soon to course correct. So now the 5 pounds were lost are now found. Sometimes you'll find 7 of them, right? So you'll find yourself in the pantry eating Oreos. You'll find yourself making an excuse that it's stress causing you to do this because your self-image never changed. So you got to change the self-image. How do you do that? You write down the new image on a piece of paper, on a sticky note, on a goal card like I do, and you just read it every morning, right before bed, throughout the day. Do it for 30 days straight, and you will replace that old image and you will stop sabotaging yourself. I know for some people this sounds too simplistic, almost immature, almost too easy. You're not going to do it. But I'm telling you, you give it 30 days, and I give you the exact instructions in this book. You will replace that self-image. You'll become unstoppable. I lived this myself. When I was losing my weight, I even got to the point where I was so extreme. I had 6-pack abs, 6% body fat, and I was looking in the mirror, and I viewed myself as an obese person, and then I kept finding ways to put the weight back. This is all based off of not just theory, but off of science. There's a book called Psychocybernetics, and it's from Maxwell Maltz from the 1960s. He called it the greatest physiological generation of his lifetime, and it's still the greatest physiological discovery of our lifetime. And he was a plastic surgeon, and he would perform surgery on individuals who had disfigurements on their face, really crazy disfigurements, and he would perform amazing plastic surgery. And he noticed that although they looked perfectly different and normal, their disfigurement was gone. When they looked at themselves in the mirror, they still saw the disfigurement, and they felt the same way. They acted the same way. The surgery made no difference because they identified their self-image with that disfigurement. So you got to replace that self-image. And the only way to do that, well, there's 2 ways: an emotional impact, which is usually negative, a near-death experience, the loss of a loved one, or the better route is constant spaced repetition, and that's the affirmation.
Yeah, that is a very thoughtful answer. Ben, this has been an awesome chat. I know we just did an absolute flyby of the book. There's so much more content that you have inside the book, including a huge section with a lot of amazing looking recipes. So
Yeah.
kudos to doing all that work and putting it all together in the book, which again is absolutely beautiful. I really love it. I love all the time that I get to spend with you, and yeah, just so grateful for you and for doing the work and getting it out there to people to really help people. So it's wonderful, and I love chatting with you. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work? And also, you have a free resource that comes with the book for people that pre-order, I believe, as well. Is that correct?
I do, yeah, and I always enjoy chatting with you, Casey. I appreciate you. I love your commitment, man. We gotta hang out soon hopefully at a conference soon, or I'll go to Salt Lake. You could come to Miami, eat some Brazilian food with me and my fiance, or
There we go.
bring yours as well. So the book is Metabolic Freedom. You could actually pre-order it. It's available on hardcover, Kindle, and Audible. I narrated the Audible myself. It's published with Hay House, and Dr. Mindy Pelz wrote the foreword. We are giving away a free bonus if you pre-order today or this week. If you go to metabolicfreedombook.com, you'll see different links to buy the book, and you simply get the book, and then you put your name, email, and order number on that page, and then you're going to be sent automatically right away an entire course for free that I did myself on the metabolism, 12 lessons, along with exclusive interviews only in this course with Dr. Jason Fung, Megan Ramos, Gary Brecka, Dr. Daniel Pompa, and Cynthia Thurlow. So you get those exclusive interviews all about metabolic freedom. So go to metabolicfreedombook.com to get that.
Excellent. We will link that in the notes. Ben, again, it's been such a great chat. I always love learning from you. And like I said, it's just so amazing that you were able to get this done and get this out in the world. I hope you're very, very proud of all of your work. So thank you as always for all the great information and all your hard work. And thanks for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for your support.
Thanks a lot. Really means a lot. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.